Good evening and welcome back to Sports Talk ATL. I am Chase Earl, joined by Alex Lord. Absolutely huge weekend of football, college football, insanity. It was one of those slates where there was one big game, everything else kind of looked like it was sleepy, and of course that's when the biggest upsets happen. Just crazy upsets. We'll get to that. Got to start off with the Atlanta Falcons because I think this was by far the most complete game. And we came into this matchup talking about how the Cowboys had weaknesses. Yes, they have all the pizzazz that is Dallas, Dak Prescott. You know, they can score points. They have star players. Micah Parsons was obviously out. But they had played very, very poor, especially defensively. Like, this was a game the Falcons could take advantage of. And not only did they take advantage offensively, Kirk Cousins was outstanding. Zach Robinson was in his bag. Darnell Mooney was a stud. Drake London gets injured, but he was fantastic before the injury. Bijan Robinson, superstar. Like, everything was good about that. But defensively, 3 sacks on Dak Prescott, pressured him all afternoon. Caden Ellis looked like Caden Ellis, the guy that we knew and loved. Like, huge stops on fourth down, critical plays. Like, that was the defense that we saw early in the season. And last year, it looked a lot more like that against an offensive team in Dallas, who, as much as they struggle defensively, has been a good offense all season.
I think there's going to be some people who don't understand how bad the Falcons beat the Cowboys on Sunday. The box score is telling a completely different story than what actually happened on the field. That game could have easily been like 41-10, very easily. Falcons play with their food a little bit, but for the most part, they were in control from start to finish. They never looked like they were panicking, pressing, and every single facet of the team, like you said, looked really, really good. Kirk Cousins, from an efficiency standpoint, he only threw for 220 yards, completed nearly 80% of his passes, though. He was just wildly efficient. And when you're going up against this Dallas defense, that's horrible. The Cowboys are a horrible football team, but I'm not taking anything away from the Falcons' win, but they've got a lot of stuff that they've got to figure out on their end. And the Falcons did what they were supposed to do, and they beat the hell out of them. And it happened in every single facet. And I think, obviously, the most encouraging thing for Falcons fans is the defense. The defense is starting to maybe come around. 3 sacks, back-to-back sacks for the first time in my recent. I mean, I can't. This is the first time the Falcons have had 2 or more sacks in a game this year since week 1 against the putrid Steelers offense that we saw, where, you know, they didn't have much of anything going, still somehow won that game. It finally looked like everybody was starting to come together and play like I don't know if it was because Dallas's offense made it so, or that Jimmy Lake decided to do some stuff that was different. But Caden Ellis, you mentioned it, this was by far his best game of the year. He's been really bad this year, and it's not just in run defense. It's the pass rushing. He hasn't been utilized like we thought he was going to be. In coverage, maybe some of that has to do with Troy Anderson. Nate Landman is absolutely horrible in pass coverage. So maybe they were trying to do something different to try and cover up some of Nate Landman's inefficiencies. But this weekend, Caden Ellis was the Caden Ellis we saw last year, and the guy that we thought we were getting this season, pass rushing against the run, making plays outside of the scope of his role. He was all over the field. It was super encouraging to see. Driver's seat in the NFC South, not only NFC South, but quickly climbing the ranks of the conference. The Lions obviously look like the class of the conference right now, but the Falcons are right there.
Yeah, no, I mean, I don't think you can even argue. Like, outside of the Lions, who's looked better, more consistent other than the Atlanta Falcons? I mean, they really only have one game over the scope of this entire season where they weren't in it, and that was the Seattle Seahawks, and those kind of games happen from time to time. But every other game, they've either been in it, they've controlled the game, they've won close games. We've talked about how they've won in multiple different ways, but we also talked about how they haven't quite put together a complete game. This was the complete game that I think we're all starting to look for, and it's hard not to look at the way this Falcons offense has looked like from week to week, like 5 out of the last 6 weeks, and been like, this is one of the best offenses in football. Kirk Cousins and Zach Robinson have completely changed the identity of this group. I mean, the play calling has gotten better each week. Kirk Cousins is getting more comfortable. We talked about the trio of guys just starting to look like top 10 picks. It seems like a different week. Everyone's having a big game. And that's what we imagined coming into the season. And it's all coming into fruition. And like, you start to look around the NFC South and you see the Saints lose 7 games in a row and they fired Dennis Allen. And obviously the Panthers are the Panthers. They're a complete mess. The Bucs are suffering. I'm dying here
tonight.
They're suffering from some injuries. You're taking driver's control, but like, you're starting to see the Falcons plan, not just for this season, in the future. Like you also have Michael Penix sitting back there waiting for his opportunity.
Yeah, I mean, Kirk Cousins is looking, I think, maybe rounding into form right now. And it's not just about his stats. To me, it's about everybody else. Darnell Mooney has already surpassed much of his totals from last year. He's on pace to have the best season of his career. Same for Drake London. Kyle Pitts is just shy of his rookie projection. Bijan Robinson is having a career year. Like, finally, the investment that the Falcons have made since Terry Fontenot came into the office is starting to pay dividends. And nobody wants to go up against this Falcons offense when they're going to be fully healthy. And they're not fully healthy yet, and we're seeing all this stuff. We're still waiting for Drew Dalman to get back. And I think, for a Falcons team that's looking in the landscape of the NFC, obviously you've got the Lions. The Lions defense, and, this is just firing from the hip, is not as good as a lot of people think it is. Their offense, different story. Ben Johnson's going to be a very, very rich man this past offseason when he inevitably leaves Detroit. I think their window is actually very, very narrow because when Ben Johnson leaves, if Dan Campbell doesn't get that next hire right, we're going to see exactly kind of what happened to Atlanta with Dan Quinn and Kyle Shanahan happen to the Lions. I guarantee it. But who can beat the Detroit Lions? It's teams that can score 30 points. And this Falcons offense can absolutely score 30 points. And this isn't even the best, the final form of the Falcons offense. Zach Robinson is going to get better. Absolute masterclass by Zach Robinson, by the way, on Sunday. I mean, I think that was his best game, best called game of the season. Kirk Cousins is only going to get a little bit healthier as the season goes. Kirk Cousins and Zach Robinson are going to start to feel each other out even more. And that goes the same for all the weapons. Like, the Falcons offense is firing on all cylinders, and we're halfway through the season. Like, it's only going to get better. Now, how much better? That's a question, but it's not in its final form yet.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard not to look back at that 2016 season. The last time this Falcons team, I mean, maybe not 2017, they were relevant, obviously made the postseason, but when they made that big run and see the similarities, at least offensively, right? And that was a team that was, I think, 4-3, and then all of a sudden they got hot, right? And they started really feeling it offensively.
6-3. This is the last.
And that's kind of what you see right now, that this team is starting to feel it offensively. It feels like every time they touch the ball, it's a big play waiting to happen from someone in this offense. Hopefully Drake London avoids missing any time after missing the second half of that game. But yeah, it just feels like it's starting to come together. And once again, you have this boy wonder. It was Kyle Shanahan in 2016. Now it's Zach Robinson, who hails from the same coaching tree. And Kyle, once Kyle Shanahan got in his bag that year, it was a wrap, right?
It's like nobody could figure it out.
And it kind of seems like Zach Robinson's starting to get into his bag, and he has a quarterback that's starting to feel confident, and all the pieces around him are starting to feel confident. And that's scary. I mean, this is a very manageable schedule down the stretch. We have the Saints next week, and it really just feels like the Falcons could go on a run here. And really, we could look up here and they're 12-5 at the end of the season, and nobody should be surprised, especially if they start figuring things out defensively. We'll see what happens at the trade deadline. We'll talk about that a lot tomorrow and the rest of this week with whatever moves they do make, because we both agree they have to make some sort of moves. But it feels like if they make the right moves, if they push the right buttons at this trade deadline, I mean, it could get scary in Atlanta. And I'm excited. And I think every Falcons fan should be excited.
Well, yeah, I was going to echo that. Every Falcons fan, it's past the point of cautiously optimism around Atlanta and the football team. You can full-fledged dive back in and be ready to have your heart broken, because this team has everything capable of making a deep postseason run. You look at the NFL, and a lot can change. Injuries, the trade deadline is obviously a big factor in all of this. The Falcons can hang with anybody in the NFL.
I mean, they've proven it. I mean, this is not this.
The Lions are getting all this praise. And when I watch the Lions, I mean, if you could score points, you can hang with the Detroit Lions.
This first half of the season was as difficult. I know the Falcons overall don't have a very hard schedule, but this first half of the season had a ton of marquee matchups with big games. I mean, you opened up with the Steelers. You went on the road to Philadelphia.
And when we played the Saints, they weren't the Saints of late.
Two games against the Bucks. Yeah. This has been the Seahawks are a potential playoff team. The Cowboys are a team that, yes, they suck, but it's still, they're no team that can just be written off. Every single game the Falcons have played teams with playoff aspirations, Super Bowl aspirations, and they're going out there and they're handling business more often than not. Everybody should be excited. I'm looking forward to Sunday every single week. Haven't said that for years. Really, really big win for the Atlanta Falcons in their most complete game of the season.